Hi there, my name's Gary and welcome to another modular tutorial stroke catch-up type thing. I've just done a quick trip to the UK and you may have seen some airport improvisations, jams, with a subset of this modular. I've got two or three more of those to go, so keep a lookout for those. They were great fun. Also on the trip I picked up the Octone here from Glasgow Synth Guild / Instruo, which is really replaced. If you remember, I had a big Moskwa Roto sequencer here with an expander and it was using almost 20 HP up of this quite busy rack. I do like lots of functionality and things in my rack, particularly this portable one, so I decided to go down to 10 HP. That allowed me, saving 18 HP, to put in my ornament and crime and my surface back in, which I was missing. Two ornament and crimes may be overkill, but I do like having them. But the purpose of this video is really to talk about how the Cosmos Quencer, which I've had for, excuse me, frog in the throat, I've had for 2 years, I think it's 2 years, maybe even 1 year, has got an update, which has now made it probably my favourite sequencer out of a whole bunch of things like the Moskwa, even the Octone now. If you remember, I had Bloom and I've had Ikari and a few other sequencers. But this update in sort of the quick version, firmware 2.1, has had a significant shift in that you can now edit things inside here. Including the scales, the patterns or shapes of notes. You can edit the rhythmic fills, and there's even a couple of extra things added, including randomising the patterns and the scales. No, randomising the patterns and the rhythms, sorry, to give you some instant gratification, if you like. And there's even, because this was partly in conversation, I emailed Center Village in Japan, and the chap there said he'd have a look at it. He was going to do a couple of bug fixes, but he's actually added all those things and even a weighting editing thing. So depending on the scale you've selected, it will allow you to say favour these notes over these notes, which is just fantastic. So in other words, it's made it a lot more musical. The difference between, say, the Octone and this is that this is, I suppose, semi-generative in that you give it the rules and you can make them really tight in terms of, do this and this, or you can make it pretty vague and it can go off by itself, whereas the Octone is very much, a set of notes using these little dials here, and the same with the Moskwa to a large extent. So you set specific notes, and the same with Bloom as well, and some of the others, and that will do a fixed sequence. So it's good to have both in your arsenal for sure. And but this one is almost all the way to being fixed as well, but just off there, if that makes any sense. So you can set rules that are really tight, or you can just let it do its own thing. It's not an arpeggiator. I think it's quite bizarre. Some people call these things arpeggiators. They're not. They are musical tools in which you set the rules and they play based on what you've set. They don't do anything by themselves. I could connect something to this, it does nothing. An arpeggiator is much like this 2HP ARP, which is an arpeggiator. where you can set the various modes of the arpeggios and so on. The other end of the scale, so if that one's like a fixed sequencer, this one's somewhere in the middle between almost fixed and really quite wild, is something like a Turing machine. And I did have the 2 HP Turing machine, but just ran out of space. And that one, you know, is sort of based on pre-built musical programs inside it. The hemispheres, Phaseville now on my Ornament Cry. I've got four effective algorithms here that has some Turing machine type things. But anyway, let's I'll just do an overview of what this is. I've already done 2 videos on the Cosmos Quencer, and you can go back and look at those. I think the first one was just looking at the basic features. The second one was looking at some of the sub-parameters, sub-menus, and some of the modulation aspects. This third one is very much going to look at the updates. But I think I need to do an overview of what this is and how it works. There's an awful lot under the surface here. It's probably one of the more complex modules that don't involve a visual interface. Everything's sort of performance orientated. And in let's do the quick version. It plays gate and CV, so you can control any of the module, just the normal modular techniques. It's also got its own built-in oscillator, which is pretty unique. So it's got 16 waveforms that you can come out as well. So it's effectively can be standalone. Clock in, so you can link it to your main clock, like Pam's here. And it's got modulation in, it's got randomization, it's got resetting. It's also got some logic-based changes that you can bring in on the CV, the notes, or the gates as well, with these logic things which make it very complex. But the real complexity is actually under the main parameters here. So you've got, let's just go around quickly, just as an overview for you sort of want to know what this is. It will allow you to, no, in fact, that's going to be just a bit too theoretical. So what I'm going to do is let's just hook up a sound source. I'll just use this mini synth, which is right next door to it. I'm going to use the stackables because I'm going to double up on these. So CV out into CV in for the mini synth, gate out into the gate in for the mini synth, and we're going to clock this just so I can have other sequences running. So we'll give it a 1 times clock from Pam's, and you can see it going round. So in theory I should have some sound. I haven't actually set the levels on this at the moment, so let's just... So the principle of it, so let's go from the beginning. So I'm going to try and do like a 5-minute overview of this, and obviously it'll be chapter markers, so you can skip forward to all the new stuff if you know this already. So we've got length. This second one here, I can change the length of the sequence, really simple. I'm going to set it to 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, see the lights there. It will go up to 16, of course. You've also got the density, how many notes will play within that 7. So it's a bit sort of Euclidean in that I can dial back the number of notes that play. So we'll keep it on 7 for the moment, full 7 going round. We've also got the register, so this was the shift key here, so we can decide which part of the spectrum we want this. I'm just going to be fiddling with the levels for a bit. Let's do that. So you can see I can go, the red is in the lower register, or I can go bipolar, if you like, into the green for the higher registers. And you might already be saying, well, that's just one note. What are you doing, Gary? So this is where the range comes in. And the range, in conjunction with the scale, gives you the melodies, if you like. So if we make the range positive, so just sort of half positive, and then choose a scale. I'm going to try and do all this with the right hand, by the way, so you can see what I'm doing. So the scale, I'm going to choose, I don't know if you saw that, but I'm rotating, and I've chosen 1, 4, 5. which is one of the built-in scales. So now it's choosing different notes, and that, again, the complexity adds up here, and this is where some people's heads hurt, but it's pretty straightforward. That's based on the pattern. So the pattern is not like a traditional thing, it's basically the shape of the notes, and we'll be going into this later when we start to edit them. So if I change a different pattern, it's going to make decisions like the first one is going to be the middle note, and then the second one's going to be quite high, the third step, is going to be quite low, and that's the shape, if you like, the shape of the melody. And you can be very specific with this. Some of them are just straight up. Bring a bit of an octave in. Some of them just go sort of up in a scale as I'm changing the patterns here. So this is pattern. And some of them bounce around. And some you can edit. That's sort of the top level. You've also got, you can hear it's sort of a bit boring because it's playing the same one. You've also got rotation, so you can actually rotate the melody, and you can also bias it, so you can move it to one side or another. Let's add a bit of a kick drum just so we've got a sense of the timing. So I'll just take a 4/4 into this kick here, just so we can know what the pulse is. The sub parameters, you press this function key and you also get another 8 controls if you like. One of the main ones I do is just to double or triple the tempo. And then this sort of comes to life if I obviously reduce the number of notes in the length. Let's put a bit of delay. I'll just have a bit of synchronized delay. I'm just going to spruce up the sound just to make it interesting for us. Just a little bit anyway. So you can see I can change the density here. And it's sticking all the time to this scale. So let's change the scale to major pentatonic. Oops. Just going through a computer interface to listen to this, and it keeps turning off. And we can change the range, we can go much lower. You can see it's playing the same melody all the time, so this is where these rotations come in. So if we rotate the melody, you can see it's still in tempo, but it's off the beat slightly. And this is where the modulation comes in. So from the second video I talked a lot more about this, but I'll take some modulation from our octave here, put it into this modulation input. So we're still in the basics here. I'm keeping it quite simple. What I'm going to do now is just a straight bipolar modulation. And one of the lovely features of this Cosmos Quencer is when I press the mod key, you can actually see the cycle it's on. So that one's a bit fast for what I want to do. So you can see it goes negative and then it goes positive. And that's a great way of sort of, getting a feel for what the modulation's doing. And you've also got built-in modulation attenuation, because when I start to change something like this rotation, so you can hear the melody there is fixed. I'm going to keep it at a very low level. I'll change that. And in fact, my monitor level is low, but the camera level's quite. Anyway, what we're talking about. So yeah, let's modulate the rotation. So that way we get this infinitely changing or much more complex melody. So press modulation, and because it's attenuated, what that means is if I just do a slight amount, we're going to get small changes in the rotation. If I do a large amount, we're going to get more rotation. You can actually see it switching around. It makes more sense on a longer sequence, of course, because everything will be rotating. Likewise, we can do multiple modulations. Press modulation again, just so you can see it. We could modulate the range so that it goes from a low register and then starts to choose more higher notes as it goes to that part. Let's put the register up here, and you can see it in more high, and then it chooses more lower notes. We can modulate every single parameter. We can even modulate some of the sub-parameters. Like, for example, one I quite like to do is a very low amount of changing the speed. So not many sequencers do this. So I'm pressing function to get into this tempo control. I'm just going to modulate it very slightly. So when it goes into the positive, it's going to speed up. Actually doing triplety things there. And the more I increase the modulation impact on the speed, the faster we're going to go. Okay, so we can get much more complex things like that. I'll turn, if you want to delete all the modulation, you know, you can imagine a world where you've added modulation to lots of parameters, and sometimes it's nice just to go, right, kill all the modulation, and it will just go back to the fixed melody. The melody, of course, is based mainly on the scale and the pattern, and then, you know, the range dictates how broad or across the octaves that is. So the pattern you can actually change as well. You see I'm doing minor changes here. So that's another way of getting a different type of melody, of course. Same fixed rhythm, but if we modulate the pattern, so now the pattern is going to be modulated. I'll keep pressing the modulation button just so you can see the cycle. And that'll be modulating around the center pattern. So if we put it on the bottom pattern here, we'll talk about those in more detail when we get into the editing. So it's choosing different notes for each step. Likewise, we can modulate the fill itself, so we can go from, excuse me, let's say a very low amount of notes to a very high amount of notes. So it may even go back to 0 notes. Let's make the speed a bit faster, just because get a bit more syncopation type stuff. I'm keeping pretty fixed sounds at the moment. Obviously, if we modulate the sounds, we get much more complexity. So what you're listening to there is just modulated pattern. Modulated pattern and the fill, the density. In fact, you can see when I press modulation, it will actually tell you with the little lights which parts are modulated. So that's good in performance, because if you notice so far, everything is happening in real time. So this is playing. Unlike the octone, which I'll do in a separate video, you have to kind of stop things every now and then just to do basic changes. But this one you can just keep going. For press modulation, let's say I wanted to go much more fixed rhythm, change the fill, I'd put the fill back into the center position, and now it'd be fixed. But of course the pattern's still being modulated. Likewise, we can take that back to a neutral position as well and end up with something very fixed. Just changing the register there, changing the selection of notes on the range. So that's the basic operation of this. We can change the scales, which leads on to the editing aspects. So one of the things I So this will be a sort of, let's go into the changes in version 2. I'll leave this ticking over in the background. So one of the problems I had initially with this, when I say problems, I mean limitations from a musical perspective, was that the scales were pretty fixed. So we had, as I go around, I'm rotating the scales here, and you can see by the blue lights what notes are part of those scales. So the first one is just a straight C. The second one is, I'll call the note out because it makes more musical sense, C, F, G. And the next one is a major pentatonic, so C, D, E natural, and then you've got G, A. And when I do go up to the last one, which is just pure semitones, it was sort of limited. I mean, I didn't even have in here like a minor I could quickly move to. You had to choose a major scale, so let's just find the major. So that, no, is that the major? No. Get there. So part of this is also the, there we go. So that's a major scale. And then I'm finding what I was doing, if that's C major, which is, if I wanted, which is fine for A minor type things, but it was favouring like the C, you know, based on the pattern selected. So I said to the Centre Village guys, is there any way of editing the scales just so that we can have different notes in? So for example, this second scale here is just C, F, G. Let's say I wanted just to add in the like an A flat on top of that. Is there any way of doing that? I also said the patterns, they're a bit abstract. A lot of the first ones are just straightforward up shapes, and then some of the others bounce around a bit. Some of the others are a bit abstract. So the pattern is a significant change. In other words, as you'll see later, it's when I start editing them, you can decide on like the first note you want in the middle, second note you want 2 octaves down somewhere, 2 octaves down. Next one you have 2 octaves up, versus it being perhaps too close to a center range. So that was the other thing I asked. And the other thing which I'm surprised they actually did was the weighting. And this really comes into play here because we've got, sorry, let me show you the scale. So on the major scale, for example, one of the issues find it really hard to find, which is one of the reasons editing your own and putting them in makes a lot more sense. So that's the major. I don't know if you can see that. C, D, E, F natural, G, A, B natural. I'll have a few more notes so we can hear what's going on. Perhaps I need a bit slower as you can't really hear the notes, so we're going to drop down to half speed. A bit of delay. Is that the right? That'll do. So that's a major scale, but it sort of feels major because it's favouring the C, if that makes sense. So I said to the guy, is there any way of weighting it so I could go in and say, I want the A to be more selected, and like the E perhaps, and even the F natural, and the C I want to be less used in the scale. So actually built in a weighting system as well, so I can actually go in and edit that. So you might be saying, Gary, is this editing easy? And yes, it is, and it's very performative as well. So let me show you one example of that. Is that a good sound to be using? So I've just gone back to a C, just a natural C natural there. Let's in fact go to the C, F, G. We'll choose a nice range. In fact, I might change the sound because you get bored. When I watch demos, I get bored of them using the same sound. So I'm just going to double up into Surface here, and we'll have something a bit more modelled available as well. Let's do that. See what Surface is doing. Quite nice. I'll put it in the middle. I didn't realise that was panned. So let's up the register a bit. So what we've got now is a selected pattern, the scale is fixed. So let's edit the scale. So this really simple solution he came up with. Press tab and then press the thing you want to edit. So in this case, tap scale. And it fixes on the scale there, which is nice in itself. So we've got C, F, G. Let's say I wanted to add an A flat. I just quickly click around. Notice all the time as well it's playing. And then I just press the center button to activate it. So these two controls here allow me to step around the scale. And then I can get to this one. And I pressed lock it in. That center button effectively locks that note in. I could remove the G. So now we've just got C, F, A flat. I can go back to the A flat, delete it, just got C and F now. I can get rid of the C, just go to the F note, just on the C. All the time, let's bring the F in again. All the time you've got control, and this is the nice thing about the editing mode, and one of my favourite features of the new firmware is you can carry on performing. So let's say, for example, let's double up on a bit of bass from the mini synth. All the time I can go back in and do the main parameter changes, and it will just flip back to the scale. Likewise, let's have a bit more syncopation. Double the speed. Let's get rid of some of the decay. Pan the sounds each side. Anyway, I'm getting too fixated on sounds now, aren't I? So we should have mini synth on one side of the stereo and surface on the other. A bit less delay, I think. So if you notice, I'm still on the scale edit mode, but I'm able to go in and fiddle around with some of the main parameters. So let's get, as I did before, we're going to modulate the rotation, just so we have a changing melody every now and then. Not actually that keen on the squelchy mini synth. So, in a performance perspective, you know, okay, it's fiddly. A lot of people will be going. So I'm just turning up surface so we can hear it. What was I saying? Yeah, in performance mode, it means that you can sort of move around and just add notes depending on the setting, you know, the settings of everything else. And I know you can do this on other sequencers, for sure. I mean, Bloom especially, you can bring in notes in and out. But perhaps not as musical. I mean, this is a kind of very precise. I can go, all right, let's get rid of that. I'm going to add an E flat. So that's just C, C, F and G. So we're going to go, right, let's go and add an E flat. And it is very precise, whereas on things like the Octone and even Bloom to some extent, you have to sort of move around and sort of find the notes in advance. But here you can be very precise, which I like. That's just C and G, the first and fifth, or root and fifth. Let's add the A flat. And the other nice thing is if you're into, so that's the A flat I did there, remove it. So that's very cool. The other thing, if you're into it, is MicroTonal. So let's focus on the G. So you can see the little white dot moving around here, hopefully, on the video. See if the video's still going. So I'm now on the G. By two ways of doing this. One of them is more intuitive. I can actually microtonally, by going up or down, change the actual tuning of just the G. So the C will stay fixed. I'm not doing a master tune on the module, I'm actually changing just that note. So it allows you to put in some pretty good, you know, potentially world type, ethnic type scales and things that are slightly detuned, which are not the true well-tempered Western scales. Let's add in that A flat again, and then make that A flat kind of weirdly sharp. That way we can resolve it. There's another way of doing this which is kind of cool. You can actually sweep around this inner circle. So as I go round, you can see the blue lights changing. Now they go red because I'm going negative. But I think actually using this is going to be easier because your finger's not blocking where it is. So that's scale editing. So, you know, if I wanted to go, you know, this is on a C, potentially I can, I haven't actually done this yet, so this will be a good test. I also want to see what happens if you turn them all off. No, it just defaults to the last one. We could potentially go in and just put a, let's say, a D scale in. So we find the D, which is that one, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and then we need a C sharp over here. So we're now into D. But of course normally you wouldn't put the whole scale in. I mean, just from a musical perspective we might just have, let's skip the B, we might just have D, F sharp, G, A, something like that. And that's the scale. So we've got, like I said, the tuning and the scales, and they will be stored in the one that you had set. So when I click tap and scale again, and we go around the circle here, as I go around, I'll find the one I was just editing. I forgot where I put it. Doesn't help, does it? I think it was the, yeah, it was the second one, sorry. So, sorry, the first one is just a C, and the second one I've now set to D thing I was doing. And I can just start using this now, go back to like a C only. We could go and edit that, and let's go C, C, F, G. That way, in performance, I can go from C, F and G if I wanted to, and if I'm playing like a keyboard or something, to suddenly go into D. So I'm now using this as a bit of a modulator, but very precisely. It's not playing the notes precisely as I want. Like I said, it's not one of these guys with fixed notes. It's choosing them based on a pattern, which leads nicely into pattern editing, which is the same process. Press tap and press the pattern icon, and then we go into pattern editing mode, and it's more or less the same principle. The little white light shows you the step you're editing, and you just move around using these two little buttons on the top here, and we can actually see, based on that step, the position of the note it's selecting. So what we mean by that is, when it's in the middle, see the lights, blue is positive, that's negative. The way this will make more sense is if I go to one step. Remember, we can go to one step if I wanted. So this is a one-step sequence, and the pattern, you can see the range, so that's a positive. So that first step, it's going to choose something within the scale, but based on the pattern shape, and that first one I've set to be in the middle. If we now go to a two-step sequence, and then I go to the second one, I can decide how high I want that second one. And this is where things get quite fixed, because you can be very precise. You can say, you know, that's the way I want it. That low one, let's go to a three-step sequence. And the third step, that's going high. So we've got center, we can see them. Center is middle, second step is, you know, an octave and a bit down. Third step is quite high. Based on, all the time, the scale. You know, if I go out of, no, I don't need to, do I? So depending on the scale, so I'm actually changing the scales here. So I'm going from a C to a D. And we can modulate the scales as well. Things get pretty complex then. You could set in, for example, 3 different scales around a center point and then bipolar modulate it between the 3 scales on a very slow modulation. And this is where things get both complicated and very controllable. But anyway, back to the pattern editing. So we are on step 4 now, so let's make the length to 4 steps, and likewise we can decide where we want that note. Let's go very low. So step 4 is very low, or we can make it very high. And that's where the shapes start to come in. Oops. Just hit the camera. Put it back in position. I thought that was locked down stronger. Apologies for that. Yeah, let's go to 5 steps. 5 steps, one of my favourite sequences. And then have a look at the step 5 pattern. And remember, I'm doing this pretty slowly just to show you, and hopefully so you can help you understand the power now of this editing. So what we're doing, oh yeah, I'm just changing the shape. So we're going to go low again on 5. I could probably slow it down just so you can hear what's going on, super slow. And then go around, just to remind you again, this pattern shape thing. Because I've had a couple of comments going, oh, I don't like this sequencer because it just feels random or something. That is definitely not random. I'm controlling the pattern shape and the scale and the range, how many notes are selected across the range, and the register, and the list goes on. So I can make it very tight, you know. But anyway, back to the pattern editing. So you can see I've got this first one in the middle, the second one is down, third one is high-ish, I can change it, the fourth one is even higher. Did you hear it go higher on the fourth one? And then the 5th step I'll make just a bit lower, just so it sort of leads into that one. And if I go out of the editing mode for pattern, you have to remember where you put it. I'm still, you know, this firmware only came out a couple of days ago, so I'm still getting under, deciding on a strategy of where I put my patterns and where I put the preset ones. I might actually blank the whole lot for scales and patterns and just add my own in eventually, but for the moment I'm just so I actually put that one, I think, on that. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but basically what I'm saying is the one the last one you selected in which pattern it was. So as I'm turning pattern here, it will show me which slot of the 16 patterns you can have. The one I edited was in. It may have been that one. Just to go back into editing, you can check it. So we've got center, high-ish. I'm changing it again, of course. Down, and then a couple of high ones for the last two, let's say. There we go. So that's my own pattern in the slot, the last slot I selected. And you could actually have a song that's going into detail where the slot makes sense for the pattern you've got. Of course, you've got the save function. It's as I showed in the previous videos, you can just press tap and start, and then choose a slot to save all of this in. So I just saved everything I've done into this slot 1 and there's 16 slots. Anyway, so I've done scale editing, I've done pattern editing. The other nice feature is, and I'm going to go to 7 steps for this one, and a bit faster, is more of what should we call this? Great in jamming for really moving things up, for mixing things up a bit. So this is a randomising feature. Right, let's just go slightly faster, get a bit more syncopation going. I think a bit more delay. Might change the sound of the surface. Not sure these are in tune. I haven't even tuned these things. So apologies if they're not in tune. Okay, I'm going to clear the modulation for the moment, so there's no confusion. We've now got a fixed pattern within the 7 steps I've got here. Change the register. We can actually, excuse me, before I do the random ad hoc-y things, we can actually edit the rhythm. Let's say, for example, we didn't want that last step. I can actually go function, tap and that. We've now got editing control over the sequence itself. So if, for example, I wanted the 2nd step, 4th step, I didn't want the 5th. And that is now fixed. Lost my sound again. So let's add the 7th step as well. So this is a great little tool for building something. Say, let's say you start with just the first note of the 7-step sequence. And then we want to add in, let's say, step 4. Increase the register a bit so you can hear the notes better. So all the time this shift and range is important because that dictates, you know, what the sound modules are really playing in terms of range. Not quite in tune, are they? I'll do it for now. Yeah, sorry, we're in that rhythm editing mode, so let's go back to that step, let's add that one in. So it's a great way of perhaps building up a sequence. You could leave it in this rhythm mode and just go in occasionally, you know, pulling in steps in and out, adding steps. You can change the patterns if you want more of an up-down movement. Range is a bit high at the moment. Let's go into the middle-y range. I think the weird tuning is surface. It's always a bit weird. Getting OCD now on the tuning. Right, go out of editing mode for the rhythm, and it so those are the steps in. Because it had some rotation on, you can actually rotate it back to where I had it, something like that, and that makes more sense. When you've got a fixed rhythm like this, you can see I can rotate it across the steps. I need to let's put it back to a 0 position. So I think that was the one I entered in. But this is, as I was saying, the randomized feature. So imagine you've got something going along like this. Let me just get a decent sort of bassy type thing going. Something like that, say. Bit of squelchiness. I'll just add a bit of like vibraphone-y type sound on the surface. That'll do. And the kick drum, not overloading you, am I now? Right, so this is very fixed. You know, we can go from something even more fixed by just setting the note to be C. We'll do for that, bit of delay, bit of reverb. Right, super fixed. As I increase the range, we start to add extra notes. Just 2 there. I'm not even sure what scale I've got selected here. Let's have a look. Oh, we've just got the CFG. And this is, during a performance, I just go, right, I actually want the A flat in. So I'll go into edit mode, quickly find the A flat, which is that one, just to give it that a bit more mystery. Increase the range, we'll get more of the notes being selected. So this is where the randomizing thing comes in. So I press the button random, and I can randomize any other function using an attenuated thing, but I'm not doing that. I just want to, this is a new feature, which when I click the random plus this CV button here, it actually changes the pattern shape. So it's still keeping the rhythm, but it's randomizing the pattern, which is great for, mixing up or stepping up, leveling up on, or just changing the range of notes that are being selected. It makes more sense perhaps with a bit more density, a few more notes to listen to. So there, for example, the pattern randomized actually added a few more A flats in the mix. Took a few out there. And you can get to a point where you find a really nice groove. Let's do that one. And perhaps just 3 notes. Mix it up again. Still going to be those 3 notes, but a slightly different pattern, so it's going to choose different ones for each step. remember, I'm not doing this in context, so that, you know, we might have that one ticking over, perhaps just on a high sequence. Something like that, perhaps. Perhaps even without the kick drum, which has probably gotten on everyone's nerves by now. Increase the register. And remember, the register is still keeping it in key, but it's just changing the like the inversions, if you like. So that's a nice start, and we can then bring in like the bass version of that bass line, and then suddenly drop the register to make it much more bassy. And then, you know, after that's built up, we can just suddenly random CV to change the note, the pattern to change the notes. Add a few more notes in the step sequence. And there's firmware 2.1 has got another feature, which is random and gate. This button at the top here will change the rhythm, and believe it or not, I've not actually done this yet, so this is going to be as much a surprise to you as me. So random gate, it should change these three notes into something else. Let's see what happens. Or not. Oh, it did. So yeah, added that last one there. Yeah, so subtly changing it. I'm guessing it makes more sense on a longer sequence, so let's go longer. I'm just going to change the length to something around 10 steps here or something. Let's try a few more notes, just so you can see the pattern. So you've got 1 gap, 2 gap, whatever. Press random. So that's kind of cool. Let's make it more stabby. I'll take the echo off so you can hear the actual stabness. Right, random gate, different pattern or different rhythm. And it's all about finding one you quite like, you know. If we increase the density, that's when we'll get more complexity. So that's interesting, nice big gap there, which will make sense with some delay to fill it in. And you could actually be super lazy and just be doing this all the time, forget doing the editing aspects. You could just randomize the notes and the patterns all the time. Until you find something you like. Obviously there's going to be happy accidents, there's also going to be parts like this one, which are not really very nice or not really grooving. And I quite like this. I tend to prefer less steps, just so I can keep my eye on what's going on sometimes. We've only got Surface and the mini synth working at the moment, so it's not ideal, I suppose. Let's change the pattern up. And again, scale, you might go, okay, but we've still only got 4 notes, so I can just quickly go in, let's add the third and minor third in. So now we've gone into much more of a A flat major 7 type feel. back out of scale editing, or let me see, yeah, this should work. So I just randomized the note selection, so that's to do with the range and the shift, I think. Yeah. And that's quite nice, because if I just kill the surface for a second, we're actually getting some lovely bass selections as well. Just going to favour the bass notes here. So those bass hits you're hearing is actually this, the pattern shape, which I suppose we can go and interrogate. We could actually have a look at what's going on. So we've got some high ones, and then a really low one here on step 4, and then a super high one on step 5, super high again, and then a very low one on step 6, which is what we're hearing, this big jump between top and bottom. So that's just one sequence on the mini synth. I don't know what the surface will add to that. Perhaps just a bit of lovely washy. So let's go out of edit mode, because we're just looking at the pattern. What I want now is to just increase the range, and we're going to go bring out more of that A minor. A flat major 7 feel. Could actually start with that. Drop the register a bit. You can still hear some of the low notes hitting on the surface. Don't know if that's the best sound. Let's try the what's it called? Prepared piano. Something a bit weird, because like I said, it's going to be picking out some super low notes and high notes, and all the time if we get a bit, if we want to change it up, I can just hit random random CV, and it will change that pattern into something perhaps just higher notes. Right, the final thing, as I realise it's turned into a long video, we can go into, we can reset this whole thing just by pressing these 3 buttons here in the middle one. And so we've actually gone back to vanilla. This is effectively erasing that everything we've done so far. And the sorry, I'm just checking on the weight. I'm checking on the weighting quantized mode. So this is, I want to do this from scratch because it probably adds an extra level of complexity to the scale editing. So just a bit of a recap. So this is the weighting just from a chapter marker point of view. This is looking at the weighting of the scale notes. So let's choose, let's have a length of just 4, really nice and easy. We'll choose a scale, just 1, 4, 5, bit of a range. What's going on there? Shift. So I'm having a bit of a bug here. The chap said if there's any bugs, give him a shout. This could be one. Just take the modulation out, just I don't think that's affecting anything. So there's the range. So choosing the shift should, so everything else is going. Shift is not giving me the ability to change that, so let's just reset it again. Interesting, I see a bug live on camera. Oh, there it is. So anyway, so there's the register, there's the thing. Length, I was just wanting to do a 4 thing for now, just talk about the weighting. Let's do 5 just for fun. And the scale, I'll just do a minor. No, in fact we want to show the weighting, so let's do 145. I'm going to keep it pretty sort of locked in like this, just for the purposes of this demonstration. So we're going to have a pattern that jumps around a bit up and down. In fact, I'm going to go and edit one of them, just so it does do a bit of jumping up and downness. So that's up. Oops. That one goes down, then we go up even higher, and then the last step sort of just below 0. Right, I've just edited the pattern there. The scale, I'm going to go into scale edit, because that's what I need to show you the weighting. So there's the scale. I'm going to add in, like I did before, the A flat in this case. I'm going to add in the E flat as well, to make it more minory. Increase the range, it will choose more notes as it bounces around. And that will be our starting point. So what we've got here is a sort of C minor, you know, C, E flat, F, G, A flat, sort of pentatonic-y feel. And it's, the weighting for each note is the same at the moment, so as it moves around the pattern and it gets to a note, it's just going to choose it. But we can, see if I get this right. Yeah, I pressed gate and CV button at the same time there. You can see they've gone pink, hopefully it comes out in the camera. And what that means is I can change the weighting of each note. So that E flat, you can see as I'm pressing this center button, it goes into varying degrees of brightness. So that one means there's no note. First one means it's going to be chosen but very randomly, or very rarely, sorry, rarely, not randomly. Next one is going to be sort of normal, then it's going to be, when it's the brightest, it means it's definitely going to be chosen a lot. So that means the E flat is going to be favoured there. I think I actually detuned it as well slightly there. Yeah, because you have to be careful you don't tap any of the other buttons, because you can detune notes. And then if I wanted to go up another note, this is where, alright, there we go. So you still use these to navigate to different notes. So let's say we wanted lots of C, go into the C note, and then just give it a higher weighting. So we've got lots of C and E flat, less of the other three, but let's really favour the A flat as well. So we're less favouring the F and the G in this case. So let's go out of this edit mode. Speed it, no, we won't speed it up a bit because we want to hear what's going on. A bit more decay perhaps. What's the surface doing? So increasing the range should still favour those three notes, which is C, E flat, A flat in this case. Go lower. It's pretty good for bass lines and things where you want, like if you're doing a walking bass and you just want it to favour 3 notes, but occasionally add in an extra one. So let's speed it up. And now it's very fixed. We can obviously change the notes by just changing the shift. In fact, I could show a nice slow modulation which will just change the notes occasionally. So put modulation in, and we're just going to modulate the shift very slightly. Press mod, you can see the bipolar going, and then just add a tiny amount of positive. So what that's doing is it's just moving the shift up and down very slightly, changing the notes. We can put the note selection in a positive direction using this range control. So it's going to be favouring those notes that we've selected, but it's going to be moving slightly up and down the register, just to give a subtle variation. We can make it more varied by obviously modulation, shift, quite positive. Just move our surface up into the higher octave. Seven steps. Go into the scale, see if we can add any extra notes. And likewise, it remembered that we were in weighting mode here, so I need to, I think, press these 2 again. Yeah, so we're just going to note selection mode. And if I want to kill the A flat, for example, so there's no A flat now, I could kill the G. So now it's just C, E flat, F. Bring them back in. And it should remember the weighting. I don't know if it does, let's see. Yeah, so oh no, it didn't. No, so everything's flat. So that's interesting. Might be a little thing to send to Centre Village, because it would be nice, like if you bring the A flat back in again, for it to be the higher weighting. It's even lost, I think, the C, but yeah. So now if you can look at this, hopefully it'll come out on the camera. We've got a bright C and a bright A flat, and then the G, F, E flat are lower. I think actually in this mode you can also switch the notes in and out. So if I go there, yeah, you can. So as well as it being a weighting, it acts as a switch as well. So now we've just got C and A flat, because on the lowest weighting it's effectively off. So let's bring the E flat back in. Whoops. Bring the F back in at the lowest probability. So this is effectively probability editing, which I didn't use the word, but which it is. Increase the speed. Go into triplet feel. Right, I think we'll call it a day. I think I've covered most of the features. Like I said, one of my favorites is this randomizing. Once you've done your sort of fixed thing, let's just go out of edit mode. So from this position, where you've got something nice going like this, bit of decay on the surface, and you can press random and CV and change the pattern, so the notes. Well, the note selection probability. And then when we've got a bit of a rhythm going with some gaps, you can change the rhythm selection by this one. Cool. So you can see it's and then you add you know, it's got its own built-in sound, which I didn't demonstrate, but let me do that just because, you know, for those with limited modules in their setups, it's nice to have this third sound source. This is very low in pitch. Just changing the register there. So this is coming from here, so there's nothing to do with Surface or the mini synth or any of the other modules. And we can go in, let's give it a bit more rhythm. And again, to give you a part of the overview to finish off, you can change these sounds. So I press function, this changes the waveforms, and we got every sort of wavetable type stuff. Choose that one, and then we've also got down here the if you like, some changes to the sound. Everything from harmonizing through to just detuning, depending on the voice selected. And in theory, this should be working tandem if it's in tune with the other CVs coming out. So I've just brought in the mini synth over on one side of the stereo. Was slightly out of tune. And then we've got Surface. But anyway, that's just back to the Cosmos Quencer sound itself, which I do like, probably less constant. And that's quite nice because we hit on the lower notes from the pattern. If you have a look at the pattern, edit it. So you can see on step 3, and we've got step 3 active. Sorry, on the first step it's relatively low compared with the other notes in the pattern, which is bringing in that sort of bass thing. We could actually lower that even more. And have a very low sort of start, and then 4 or however 6 other notes which are higher range. And because it's being harmonized, we're getting quite a nice effect. But all to do with the editing. So I'm going to have fun, you know, digging deeper into this and using it in performance. Everything you saw there, we didn't stop the music, you know, so that's where things start to get really interesting, that you can just do all of this. Admittedly a bit fiddly, so you're not going to really do this bopping with your head going up and down to a live techno thing. You might do the randomising features, which I showed you, in a sort of live situation. Just changing things quickly, because you haven't got the headspace, and that's the advantage of the bigger modules. But this is great for more, you know, getting your head down and doing more musical things. So hopefully that was useful. So yeah, definitely consider this if you're into a sequencer that's got a lot of depth, something you can control into the minutiae of weighting, deciding on which parts of the sequence you want to sound more than the others, musical notes, everything from rhythms, and then modulation. You can modulate the whole lot, 16 plus parameters, and the list goes on. So a great little thing, plus its own built-in sounds, compared with something like the Octane, which is pretty rudimentary in comparison to this. Even with the two of them together, it's still pretty rudimentary, as is the Moskwa. So yeah, any comments, questions, ask down below. Thanks very much.